Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, the quad, it's still on for Manchester City. VAR comes to their rescue in a 3-2 win at Swansea in the FA Cup. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer claims Manchester United they've taken a big step backwards after they were knocked out of the Cup by Wolves. And it's been a momentous week for Liverpool. Was their 3-1 victory over Bayern Munich, one of the best performances of all time by an English club in Europe. Here to tell us this morning, Oliver Kay is the chief football correspondent at The Times. Charlie Bedouard is a sports journalist with the Evening Standard, and Jeremy Cross, dressed like Zidane, as the chief sports writer with the Daily Star. Very stylish look this morning, Jeremy. I like it. Love the inspiration. Zidane, of course, back at Real Madrid and off to a winning start last night against Celta Vigo. Don't forget to tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes. OK, let's have a look at the papers then. Back page of the Sunday Express. In quad we trust. What a result for Manchester City. Big comeback, 2-0 down against Swansea last night at the Statue of Liberty. They went on to win 3-2. For the love of quad, that's the back of the Sun this morning, reflecting on City's comeback last night. The Sun's goals pull out. Herrero Gomez, was it his last appearance for Watford at Vicarage Road? Probably was in the FA Cup. We expect him to retire at the end of the season, but he will play, we think, for Watford in an FA Cup semi-final at Wembley Stadium. They beat Crystal Palace yesterday. The Sunday People. Transfer story here. Tap Gea. Not sure about the headline, but they are sure about the story, and it's David De Gea. Real Madrid want to sign him. Zidane in the market for a goalkeeper. He dropped Thibaut Courtois last night, played Keylor Navas. The Sunday Times, Jonathan Northcroft, a regular on this programme. He's writing about Sadio Mane, the main man, scored twice for Liverpool in their 3-1 victory over Bayern Munich. In the week he starts this afternoon for Liverpool against Fulham at Craven Cottage. We'll talk more about Liverpool later. Zidane, he's going to be busy in the transfer market. He wants Christian Eriksen. It's £200 million, according to the back page of the Daily Star. You can safely say Eriksen will start as a Tottenham player if that's the kind of money they want for him. The Sunday Mirror, Peter Beardsley, this is across a lot of papers this morning, left his role at Newcastle United as a coach, but he says, I'm not a racist and I'm not a bully. That's the back page of the Sunday Mirror. It's in a lot of papers, though, this morning. Sam Wallace's column, exclusive to the Sunday Telegraph, though, of course. The World Cup, with 48 teams, it proves that FIFA still keen to sell the game's soul. We'll talk more about FIFA and the World Cup in part 4 of today's programme. We'll get onto the football in a moment, but Jeremy was at Twickenham last night, and, it was an amazing day of comebacks, an amazing comeback at the Liberty, but an amazing comeback by Scotland last night.
Yeah, it was the strangest game anyone in the press box had ever seen, I think. England wiped the floor with Scotland. 30 minutes gone, 31 points up. Game over, or so we thought. Scotland ravaged by injuries. And then this miracle took place after the break. I don't know what Gregor Townsend said to the Scotland team, but
it worked.
And they were winning, and everyone was sort of willing Scotland to hold on, and it would have been the greatest comeback in international rugby history. And then England spoiled the fun and got a draw.
Yeah. How does it compare? A top rugby game with top Champions League game? I know you're at Man City on Tuesday, but say Bayern Munich against Liverpool or the Champions League final. How does it compare for you?
That was pretty special yesterday, I've got to say. It was. I mean, there are more seasoned rugby writers than me, and they were saying it's the greatest game they've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, an interesting thing was with the line. No, I'm joking.
OK, let's get on to the issues of the day. The football yesterday. Manchester United lost at Wolves last night at Molineux. They're safely through to an FA Cup semi-final. 2 defeats in a row for Solskjaer now, one at Arsenal last weekend and now against Wolves in the Cup. But also Manchester City. Which is the biggest story for you, Ollie? Because we'll start there.
The more dramatic game was at Swansea, I think. The Man City 2-0 down, or Swansea 2-0 up, and Man City turned it round. But was anyone really surprised that Manchester City turned it around? I know there was the VAR controversy with the penalty for the second goal debatable, the third goal clearly offside. But I don't think anybody would really have been surprised that Manchester City were able to turn it round, because we know how good they are. I think Manchester United's defeat at Wolves was just underlined, I think, 2 things. One, that Manchester United are not the finished article, despite the resurgence that they've made under Solskjaer, and that Wolves are a really, really good team and are capable of beating anyone on their day, and the results against the top six, the Premier League's top six, whether in the league or in the cup competitions, have been fantastic, and that just underlined again last night what a good team they are. And I think if Manchester City are to try and win the quadruple, I think if Wolves are the team in their way in the semi-final, I think they'll be more concerned.
Yeah, Wolves pretty slick last night, weren't they, at Molyneux? Of course, they did well to beat Liverpool earlier on in the competition. But Shai, let's go to the VAR debate here, because you were at Watford yesterday when VAR would have been used for controversial incidents, and then a few hours later at Swansea City, you've got an opportunity. There's an opportunity here. We don't have VAR. Why don't we have consistency at this level of the competition at this stage?
I'm not quite sure. I'm a big fan of VAR. I've talked about it on this show before. But clearly it's just been used at Premier League grounds, isn't it, in the FA Cup? And I don't think that's fair. I think if you're going to use it at all, you need to use it across the board. Now, I know some stadiums, some clubs don't have the sort of infrastructure to be able to use VAR, and I think that's what one of the reasons was given as to why it wasn't used. But for Swansea, I mean, they were able to use it there. They could have used it there. But I think it was decided that actually we just need to be consistent and just use it at Premier League grounds. But then you get a game like yesterday where, I mean, I didn't think it was a penalty. And then, of course, there was the offside winner. And I think that if you have VAR in a game like that, it potentially does change the outcome of a game, and you have to feel sorry for Swansea going 2-0 up. It was a fantastic performance to get 2-0 up. And then to have it kind of, I felt a bit snatched from their hands in controversial circumstances. Of course, you've got to give props to Man City for coming back. But yeah, it needs to be used, I think, in a consistent manner, and I think it should be used where possible, as long as the infrastructure is there at certain clubs like Swansea. I think it should be used.
Does it damage the credibility of the competition that we get to a quarter-final stage earlier on in the day? It's in place at Watford. You go to Swansea, Premier League stadium last season. They could have used it. They have the infrastructure there. It's not used. Does it damage the FA Cup?
I think it does, because I think if you had it at Watford, and it wasn't needed at Watford in the game, you've got it in the Wolves game. Obviously, it was used to overturn the red card given to Lindelof. And then it wasn't used in a game where it was desperately needed in two separate occasions. I think it does damage the integrity. I think it needs to be used where possible across the board, or you just don't use it at all. I think that's the answer.
But one thing is, it's not unfair on anybody. If I mean, I agree with Charlie on the consistency issue, and you would ideally have it across all grounds or none.
Yep.
But it's not like a league, it's not like a league competition where it's fair if it's there at some grounds and not at others. I don't think anybody particularly suffers or can be said to have it prejudiced against them if they haven't got VAR in a game. VAR is meant to be a level playing field, and not having VAR is meant to be a level playing field. It doesn't favour one team or the other. So I don't.
But not having it yesterday has cost Swansea a potential trip to Wembley.
It has, but it could equally have cost Manchester City. It could equally have worked in Swansea's favour. I mean, people say, well, VAR favours the big clubs. Well, how?
No, that doesn't.
How? I don't.
But the fact is, for a quarter-final of the oldest competition in the world, for one match to have it and another not, it just seems not right.
Particularly when they're back to back to back.
Yeah, it's not a level playing field, is it?
But it's a level playing field in that match. That's my
right,
point.
So if
it's
Watford,
not like a league competition.
If a decision had been denied, say Watford yesterday, say if they'd not been there, and cost them, and then Swansea had it, and they'd have gone through, how is that fair? You get that?
Because they're two different matches. So it's not like.
I know, but how can it be right
Swansea
for one FA Cup quarter-final to have it, and another quarter-final not to have it? That doesn't seem.
It doesn't.
fair.
It doesn't. It's not. I think it's fair. I just don't. I mean, it's not consistent, and it's not ideal if you have it at some grounds and not others. But there's no fairness issue if you do have it or don't have it. It's not. I don't see who's really suffering. What, Swansea suffering? Yes, because the decisions went against them in that game. But it's not because of, it's that could have gone either way, couldn't it? If you've got VAR or if you haven't got VAR, you can still have decisions go for you or against you. It's not like it's unfair on Swansea that there's no VAR in the FA Cup.
All the decisions going Man City's way at the moment, because you're there on Tuesday night, and okay, it was very, very comfortable VAR in operation in the Champions League, and there was an interminable wait. It was one of about 2.5 minutes.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, there were four VR decisions in about 20 minutes, and it just got laughable because there was one for offside, which took about 5 seconds to work. But we were there, weren't we? And you just saw it one time on the replay, and you thought, well, that's either offside or not. You don't have to be a genius to work it out. And it took about 2 minutes for him to. The players stood around. It's just. She says I'm all for it because you get better decisions, but the process is not slick enough. Essentially, it needs sharpening up in terms of how it takes place.
OK. Man City sharpened up in the second half yesterday, Vishali. They're still on for the quadruple. They've already got one trophy in the bag, of course, with the Carabao Cup. They're on course for the FA Cup. They're certainly playing an FA Cup semi-final. Can they do it?
It's going to be tough, clearly. It doesn't happen too often in football. But, yeah, they've got the squad there, they've got the mentality, and they've got the experience as well off the back of their Premier League title-winning season last year. If you look at the Champions League draw, you know, I know Guardiola said it's 50-50, but they've got to be confident of going through over Tottenham because they've beaten them. I think in their last 3 meetings in the league in the last couple of years, they've beaten Tottenham. And Tottenham aren't going to be an easy team to beat. You know, they're flying high in the Champions League off the back of their 4-0 win, aggregate win over Borussia Dortmund. But of late in the Premier League, they look like they're suffering a little bit, obviously 3 losses and a draw. So City will be confident, I think, of going through to the semi-finals of the Champions League over Tottenham. Clearly, this is a cup that they'll be obviously targeting as well. And the Premier League, they're 1 point ahead of Liverpool. I still think the Premier League title race is going to go down to probably the final game of the season. It's going to be tight, but I think what they do have over Liverpool is the experience of getting it done and getting it over the line. So they're on for the quadruple, but I think Guardiola's quite keen to sort of dampen expectations a little bit, just so he relieves the pressure off the shoulders of his players.
Because we're setting them up for the quadruple here, and it's now dominating every time they play a game, every fixture they win. Can they do it? Can they do it? Can they do it? Are they being set up for disappointment? Is that why Pep is saying, you know, if we win 1 or 2, we've already got 1 trophy. We're on a journey. This is a long process. Is he just trying to manage the expectations because anything else will be seen as a disappointment if they don't win all 4?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, this time last season, I think they were still on course for it, weren't they? Or till around this stage, or till mid-February, they lost in the cup to Wigan. But there was a lot of talk of trebles and quadruples then. And Guardiola said, no, we never talk about this. It is just a media thing. And then one of the players, I think it was Zinchenko, said, oh, yeah, we're constantly talking about it in the dressing room. It's natural to want to, you know, if you've got a squad that's that good and that deep and you're equipped to compete on 4 fronts, it's natural to think that you can win them all. And I mean, you only have to see the belief that they have, that second half performance yesterday, and the spirit that they have to know that they are serious about trying to do that. They're not going to just cast one of those competitions aside in the...
Plus, it's never been done before.
No.
So it's a novelty.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think Guardiola's quite careful about complacency creeping into his players and his squad. When he signed Mahrez last year, you know, everyone was like, well, why do you need him? And he's like, well, I don't want my forward players, no matter how good they are, to become complacent. And he talked at the start of this season about, you know, his players increasing and improving themselves this season, despite the fact that they broke so many records last year. I think he's quite keen on making sure that there's no complacency there. We saw against Schalke how they had to come from behind to beat them 3-2 in that first leg. They were obviously losing 2-0. So I think he can see that at times his team can be slow off the mark. They can get the results in the end, but he doesn't want them to become complacent in their search for this quadruple.
Manchester United getting a little bit complacent. Brilliant result against Paris Saint-Germain. I think they were forgiven and excused last week's defeat against Arsenal.
Played quite well against Arsenal.
But they were excused. They were off the hook, weren't they? Because
but they didn't play well
of the run they've been on. Yesterday they didn't play. It was disjointed.
Mourinho was back in the dugout. There was just no urgency, no speed to their passing. All the best players were on a day off. But look, there's
no day off as a Manchester United player, though, is there?
The theory... So everyone's debating why the board haven't actually made Solskjaer manager on a permanent basis. Why wait till June? He's clearly the outstanding candidate for the job. And one theory is that if they do announce it, there may be a lull in performance, which if you could argue, well, if there's going to be a lull in performance, why give it to him anyway? But look, if you go back 2 months, then United supporters would have snatched your hand off to be where they are now. They've got a genuine chance of getting in the top 4. They're going deep in the Champions League. They've just had a bad week, really. But I don't think much has changed. I don't think the board think any different of Solskjaer. They just had a bad day yesterday, didn't they? But they play. Who do they play next weekend? They've got a tough game next week. Watford.
Watford, I think.
Yeah.
So the pressures. You lose a game and it's.
They've got
it's a
time off,
massive
of course.
talking point,
International.
isn't it? It's just
the
the size of
international
the club.
break next week.
The thing is, if you look at it, the past 3 months, he has done an absolutely fantastic job. Absolutely nobody could dispute that. He's done a fantastic job. But the question of whether he's a man for next season shouldn't be based on the job. I mean, it shouldn't be based on, does he win a cup? Does he, do they beat Paris Saint-Germain? Do they get in the top 4? It should be based on what the board think he can do next season. It should be based on whether he's the man to do it longer term or medium long term. And to me, if they'd rushed into just appointing him on the basis of those first few months, that would have been a mistake. I think I've criticised the United's board a lot over the last few years, but I think when people are saying, why don't they announce it? Why don't they appoint him? I think United are right to be just a bit more circumspect about that, and maybe, I mean, what happens if they just level off between now and the end of the season? Would it still be the right thing to appoint Solskjaer? I think he's done an absolutely brilliant job, absolutely surpassed all expectations, but they should still be a bit open-minded about it, just in case it does wear off, just in case somebody else might come on the market that would be a better long-term bet. 'Cause it has to be about what's best for them long-term, not about rewarding somebody for doing a brilliant job as caretaker. Because we've seen, Roberto Di Matteo, etc. We've seen so many times and at smaller clubs where a caretaker does a brilliant job and they're not the person to take it forward. I'm not saying Solskjaer isn't, but I think they should be open-minded about it.
Will he still be at the wheel?
I think he will be, but I think he's made an almost irresistible case. But I say almost because there has to be some element on the Manchester United board that thinks, do we look at alternatives and weigh them up and think about what other people might have to offer?
I think they should be looking at alternatives, not because of what Solskjaer has or won't do this season. I think when they make this next appointment, they need to make sure that the manager fits into what they're looking for, as you mentioned, because when they hired Jose Mourinho, it was kind of a feeling that, he doesn't bring enough youngsters through into teams, something that has it happened quite a lot at United. There was questions about his style of play. I think when they make their next appointment, they need to make sure that the manager understands the philosophy that United have and want to have going forward, and of course can obviously achieve the aims that they want, which is winning major trophies of Premier League. Solskjaer clearly fits into a lot of that, having obviously come through United, and he's done a fantastically great job so far, despite the last 2 results. But I think they should be considering all options.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
The other
considering
issue is
all options.
obviously
Yeah,
Woodward's got it wrong 3 times in a relatively short space of time, so that might explain why he's sort of taking his time over this one.
Prevaricating a little bit. OK, next up, we're going to talk about Liverpool and their performance in Munich in the week. They won 3-1. They're safely through to the Champions League quarter-final. More on them coming next. Welcome back. If you read the papers a couple of weeks ago, you'd have thought that Tottenham's performance in Dortmund was the complete Champions League performance when Harry Kane scored the winner 4-0 aggregate victory. And then along came Liverpool in Munich. We were both there, Ollie. Mm-hmm. Is this up there? Is this up there in terms of quality, composure, conviction, performance in terms of a team playing at the highest level in the Champions League away from home? Is it right up there?
It's up there. I wouldn't say it was the best or anything like that. I think we've seen English clubs go to, for example, Barcelona at their peak in the Nou Camp. We've seen Chelsea get a heroic draw there. We saw Manchester United get a very disciplined draw there back in 2008. Liverpool won there a couple of years prior to that. So it was an extremely good performance on Wednesday night. And the thing that really struck me about that Liverpool performance was as you say, the composure, the discipline of it. Because if you go back 18 months or just over 12 months before they signed Van Dijk, they were playing wonderful football at times, but they were all over the place a lot of the time. They had this sort of very skittish, reckless, rash side to their character, which would surface in games, and they'd go through sort of 10 minutes of madness and they'd concede 2 or 3 goals. I saw them do that in Seville in the Champions League, and on numerous other occasions. They had no composure whatsoever, and Van Dijk has clearly given them that composure. Alisson has, Fabinho in front of the defence, but all round you just see a massive improvement in Liverpool. The maturity into the way they've matured into a really composed, intelligent, sensible, mature team, that's the biggest transformation for me. People could say, oh, Alisson has made such a big difference, which obviously he has. He's a massive upgrade on Karius, but the all-round maturity of the team is so different, and that's what's made them competitive on both fronts.
Why do we continue to be surprised by them, Bashar? This is a team that got to the Champions League final last year against Real Madrid. OK, they lost it, but those sort of performances, the sort of performances that took them there, would have given them the belief that they can do this all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the game, the first leg against Munich. It was 0-0. It was sort of a sense of frustration in that game that they couldn't score, they couldn't break down this really well-organised Bayern Munich side. But that was a really good result for them, not conceding an away goal. And I was quite confident that they would go to the Allianz Arena and score a goal because, despite the fact that Firmino's 2 goals against Burnley were his first, I think, in 5 Premier League games. Obviously, Mohamed Salah hasn't scored now, I think, in 4 Premier League games and 6 in all competitions. Sadio Mane is scoring. He's scored now 10 goals in 10 games now. So for me, I knew that, given the fact that they are much more composed now, a lot down to the fact that they are now solid in defence. They've got a settled defence as well, despite the fact they've had injuries at the back. That gives them the platform then to really go on and to do what they do up front, because I think for a while they were so heavily focused on their attack, but you always felt that they'd concede a goal. Now this is a different Liverpool side where you think that they can score goals, but they can also keep opposition attacks from scoring. I mean, I remember the game against Napoli, the 1-0, when they had to win and they couldn't concede, or they'd be knocked out of the group stages. And they were so composed. They got the goal and they defended really well and were organised. And I think, part of that is down to experience as well. I think over the last 18 months, the transformation of the team, I think they've got much more experience now. I think the Champions League final defeat hurt them. And they've got the experience of going all the way in that competition. And now they're obviously going to be trying to do it again this season, while also testing their ability to really go for the title across a 38-game season as well. So I think experience plays a big part in that as well.
We saw last weekend, coming off the back of the Paris Saint-Germain victory, that Manchester United slipped up at Arsenal. They were forgiven, I think for the defeat, and people understood that victory had taken a lot out of them, and perhaps that was the reason that they didn't play particularly well against Arsenal. Liverpool this afternoon are at Fulham. Are they vulnerable here? Is there a danger, or are they so focused on their goals and what they want to achieve this season that there'll be no let up this afternoon at Craven Cottage?
I'd be very surprised if they don't win today. I mean, obviously, United were playing Arsenal, weren't they? So, who were banging form actually. Arsenal, of the top 4 sides, they're going under the radar really. Whereas Fulham are in disarray and almost certain to get relegated. So had it been a more difficult game, that equation might have come into it, but I can't see Liverpool slipping up today.
Yeah, OK. Liverpool looking strong. Champions League draw, what did you think? Manchester United, of course, playing Barcelona, and of course that has some pretty nostalgic memories for Manchester United fans, for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Liverpool, of course, playing Porto. Tottenham against Manchester City, which we've already touched on. What did the draw tell you?
I think Liverpool got probably one of the more appealing draws in Porto. Obviously, they played against them last season and beat them very comfortably 5-0 in the away leg. And Manchester City, Tottenham is an intriguing one. I think everyone was thinking, well, what if Manchester City get Manchester United? What if Liverpool get Manchester United? I think probably people, particularly up north, looked at those three teams and thought, well, what of those, one of those, or two of those three play each other. But Manchester City Tottenham is intriguing really, because as you said earlier, City have had the better of those league games in recent years. But Spurs are capable of beating anyone on their day. I really do believe that. I know there's the sense that they're not capable of seizing the day, but I think Spurs are. They're certainly one of the stronger teams left in the competition. Not an easy draw for City, and as Barcelona, Man United is very appealing. But yeah, I think United have really got their work cut out there.
Yeah, you wouldn't be sure about Tottenham if you read Phil Thomas's column this morning. Gritty opinion and no-nonsense attitudes. If you read his piece on Mauricio Pochettino, he says time's up for Poch as the Premier League's poster boy. And if you read this and then think, OK, we've got Manchester City 3 times in 10 or 11 days, he's got no chance. Are you about
well,
to...
Go on.
No, you've had your say on this programme. Is this just affirmation?
I've got to bow to Philly. I can't match that in terms of criticism. But look, they are on a really bad run domestically. They're a curious side, aren't they? They are now. They looked a few weeks ago. They were in with an outside chance of winning the title, and now they're struggling to finish in the top 4 on current form. I don't think they're 4 without a win, is it? And yet they breezed past Dortmund and got to the last state of the Champions League. So there seems no rhyme or reason to it. I've said this many times on this programme, but he really needs to win something at some point soon, because it will just take that edge off. You know, here's a guy who... Has he taken the team as far as he's ever going to take them? That's the debate, I suppose, and, you know...
You think... Is there a north-south thing here? You think there's a media loving, don't you, in the south with Pochettino? You think there's a London loving with everything about Pochettino, his team, Tottenham Hotspur, and the way that he conducts himself?
Thanks for that.
OK,
I don't think he gets as much criticism when they lose a game as, say, Mourinho did when he was having a bad spell at United.
But do you not think Mourinho was a big part of the problem at United, and do you not think that Pochettino is a big part of the solution for Tottenham? I don't think Pochettino is in any way any source of weakness for Spurs. I think
solution to what?
Solution to
finishing in the top 4 every year.
They have a miles bit smaller budget than the other 5 teams in the Big 6. Their budget is much closer to, say, West Ham's than Arsenal's or Liverpool's. Never mind Manchester City's, Manchester United's, and they're consistently outperforming 2 or 3 of those teams every year. They're consistently getting into the Champions League. I hate it when people disregard trophies and say, oh, you know, it's only the League Cup, it's only the FA Cup. But in terms of overall managerial performance, I think it's hard to fault him on the basis of
what is the next step for Tottenham then?
Well, they're trying to win something, but because he doesn't feel they're able to compete on 4 fronts, the same way that Klopp doesn't feel Liverpool are, he's not prioritising getting into the top 4 and you know trying to win a League Cup. He's trying to win the Premier League, trying to win the Champions League, setting his sights high, and I think it's very difficult for Spurs to win the Premier League. Very difficult for Spurs to win the Champions League.
When your chairman won't sign you a player.
Well, exactly. They've not been able. He's not been able to improve the team in the transfer market over the last, what was it, three transfer windows, and yet the team hasn't gone backwards like a lot of teams do when they don't invest. The team, despite a bad month, I'd say they've improved year on year, and I think to do that is a sign of a really good manager doing a really good job.
Tottenham to win the Champions League against Man City, win that one.
I think City will win it.
I know you do. I know you think they'll win all 3 of those games, 3 meetings, 11 days. We need to move on. Another subject, pretty serious subject too, which is the behaviour of supporters. Last weekend, of course, we were at Arsenal for the Manchester United game. Supporter ran onto the pitch then, and it was a minor skirmish with Chris Smalling, Manchester United defender. Earlier on in the day, St Andrews, of course, Birmingham City supporter punched Jack Grealish, subsequently imprisoned. And then yesterday at Swansea City as well, another incident. What can the game do? What can the game do to police itself better?
I think we need to look at the stewards there. There's a lot of talk about how much they're paid, whether or not some stewards feel that, you know, is it worth their while getting involved with some of the really hardcore fans putting themselves at risk? I mean, you look at the stewards now. I remember when West Ham first moved into London Stadium, and there's all the talk about at the bowling ground, the stewards who'd been working, they had been working there for years. They knew all the hardcore fans. They knew how to deal with a lot of fans. The fans knew them as well. And when they moved to the London Stadium, a lot of the stewards were new. They didn't know anyone who was there, you know, and that made their life a bit more difficult to try and police fans. I think we need to look at how much some of these stewards are paid. There probably needs to be more training, perhaps, as well. But yeah, I think there needs to be a strong stance by clubs. Clearly, banning fans is right and should happen, but I hope that the incident involving the fan who ran on in the Birmingham City game, I hope that, you know, the fact that he was jailed, I hope that is a deterrent, and I think it will be a deterrent because, you know, this guy now has a criminal record. Everyone knows who he is. It's unacceptable what's been happening, and I think we need to look at sort of the stewarding, sending out strong messages, and clubs clearly like Birmingham City are doing that. But it's a worrying trend of late.
What I fail to understand, though, Jeremy, is, OK, the stewarding and policing issues and security issues at football stadiums, but at what point do you turn up to a football stadium thinking, I might run onto the pitch today? You have a responsibility for your own behaviour. Why do you need to rely on a steward to stop you running onto a pitch?
Well, I agree with everything Vishy said, but while football has merely showcased what it clearly is an issue with the wider problem in society. We live in a world where there are a lot of wrong people out there who don't look at life through the same eyes as us guys, and thankfully most guys. I mean, look what happened in New Zealand the other day. You just can't explain or fathom how someone could do or behave like that. And yeah, you're right. Guys go to football matches, and if they want to get on the pitch, they will get on the pitch. I mean, Paul Mitchell, who knocked Grealish to the turf, who's now in 14 weeks in prison, he'll come out of prison, and will he be bothered about the fact that he's been to prison? I don't know the guy, but he's clearly, obviously, you know, got issues. And I don't know how you stop it from happening. I really don't. You can do all those things we just discussed. But it's a really worrying situation.
The other thing that's worrying is Karen Brady's column in The Sun this morning. It shows what short-term memory is. Well, a short-term memory I've got for sure, because she lists a few other incidents going back further. She goes back to the banana skin thrown at Aubameyang. And I know that the supporters concerned insist that wasn't racially motivated. She talks about a glass bottle being thrown at Celtic's Scott Sinclair last December. Dele Alli hit with a plastic bottle during a game. During the North London. But it's very easy for us to forget these things. But as soon as you start taking a history lesson, you realise actually just how prevalent some of these things are.
Yeah, and as Jeremy said, these things they reflect, I'd say, what is an increasingly angry, fractious society at the moment. I think generally, if you look at the times in history where hooliganism goes on the increase and then fades away, it probably reflects certain political trends at those times as well, social trends at that time. And if you look at, I remember the sports minister when she took over, or the latest sports minister when she took over a few months ago, said, I'm going to sort out, my priority is to sort out football's racism problem. It's not football's racism problem, it's racists in society who, some of whom are at football grounds. And so you'd think a government minister would be more aware of that than most people, but no, it's so you can't just say, let's clean up football, let's clean up football's racism problem, let's clean up football's hooliganism problem, because it's just, football grounds are always a showcase for a mirror of society, I suppose, and you get more angry people, more disenfranchised people now than you probably did 15 years ago. Marcelo Bielsa, I thought, made the most intelligent point on that all week when he was saying about clearly there's something wrong in somebody's life if they feel the need to run on the pitch and attack somebody. That's right.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with him. Good
Grealish
point,
did handle it really well, though,
he did,
when you look back at it.
As did Chris Smalling. It's restraint.
No, he did. Class acts. OK, next up, guys, we're going to talk about Paul Scholes and his 31 days in charge of his boyhood club, Oldham Athletic. Welcome back with us this morning, Oliver Kay, Vishali Bidwaj, and Zizou's here as well. Just taking style tips. Hola. From Zinedine Zidane, Jeremy Cross from the Star. OK, let's just remind you what's in the papers this morning. Back of the Sunday Express, in Quad we trust. Big comeback here from Manchester City. They needed it to keep their quadruple hopes alive. They won 3-2 at Swansea. They were 2-0 down, but VAR saved them. It is for the love of quad. That's the back of the Sun this morning. Phil Thomas's column, which Jeremy has devoured every word of in the Sun. Time is up for Poch as the Premier League's poster boy. I think Jeremy probably agrees with the sentiment. Everyone agrees with the sentiment of this. Sadio Mane, the main man at Liverpool, is in action this afternoon. He was in action in the week. He scored twice for Liverpool in their 3-1 victory over Bayern Munich. I'm not a racist and I'm not a bully. This is Peter Beardsley talking for the first time publicly since he was released, since he left Newcastle United. Of course, he was an academy coach there. A couple of transfer stories, £200 million. That's what it will cost for Real Madrid to sign Christian Eriksen from Tottenham. They'll have to splash the cash for this man as well. David De Gea linked with Real Madrid this morning on the back page of The People, not for the first time. Sam Wallace writing in the Sunday Telegraph this morning. The World Cup with 48 teams proves that FIFA still keen and are selling the game's soul. We'll come on to that in part 4 of today's programme. But part 3, let's start with some managers. One manager who's left his club this week, Paul Scholes, 31 days in charge at Boundary Park. It's the club, of course, that he was attached to, associated with and supported as a boy. This is the job that he always wanted. He lasted a month. Why?
Well, from what I hear and read, it sounds like it's been an utter shambles from the start. I mean, he arrived to much fanfare, you know, one of the game's greats. A great footballing mind, always wanted a chance in management. Oldham and the club he's always supported. It seemed like the fairy tale, and it has been a nightmare by the sounds of it. So there's been numerous instances of the team bus not turning up, players told to wash their own kit, the electric getting turned off, the bailiffs being involved.
Not washing their own kit's not unusual at that level. AFC Wimbledon exactly the same. They're in League One. Third bottom of League One, the club players after training wash their own kit. It's not that point there. That's not unusual.
No, and you could argue that Scholes, you can't tell me Scholes doesn't know or didn't know the full picture of how that club is run, how it operates, what its ambitions are, and he took the job. But clearly it must have been, for him to leave after a month, must have been pretty drastic. And, you know, look, the very fact that Scholes didn't even ring Mr. Lemsagan to tell him he was quitting and just sent him a brutal message on social media tells you everything you need to know about how their relationship unfolded.
Should he have stuck it out, Ollie? This isn't Manchester United, is it? Let's not pretend it's ever going to be Manchester United. OK, in terms of distance, they might not be too far away from each other geographically. But he has to be realistic. This is life in League Two. A struggling football club.
I was surprised in the first place that Paul Scholes spoke about management, because we can see various players through their playing careers and say, oh, you could see him being a manager, you could see him being a manager. It doesn't always. It's not always the ones that you expect that end up being good managers, or it's not some of the ones you'd expect to be good managers don't turn out to be. But Paul Scholes, shy, introverted, not necessarily a leader in a way that you probably have to be a manager. Very much a natural footballer rather than a sort of methodical footballer. It surprised me when I interviewed him a few years ago, and he said, "Yeah, I want to manage." And I think in the right environment, maybe he or most people could flourish and learn on the job and develop as a manager. But how many clubs, particularly in the lower divisions, and indeed the Championship, how many clubs have the right environment these days, the right structure, the right ownership model, patience?
But nothing's perfect, is it? Unfortunately, we're not living in a perfect world, as we know.
No, but there are a lot of clubs. There are a lot of clubs these days which are absolutely chaotic. A shameful number of clubs are chaotic, and Oldham seems to be one of those. And there are other clubs higher up, say in the Championship, where they might be reasonably well run, but you lose 3 or 4 games and you're sacked. Where managers don't get time, young managers don't. We saw Darren Moore get sacked last week, and you know, there are so many examples of young managers being appointed but just not getting time because there's no patience, there's no willingness to, you know, take 1 step backwards to take 2 steps forward. It's all about results yesterday, really, and it's so Scholes never struck me as one who was cut out for management. I'll be surprised if he is desperate to come back to it at any level, but I think there is a broader thing about managers not being given the environment and the structure in which to develop.
Which you wrote about in your column, yesterday, because you named a number of former England players who've turned to management. Of course, one of them being Paul Scholes, Sol Campbell, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard. Of that group, who's impressed you the most so far?
Probably Gerrard. I think to go into Scottish football for me, that was great to see because you know, he's drummed up a lot of interest in the SPL now, thanks to him being there. He always struck me as someone who would be good as a manager as well. As you mentioned, that, you know, some players, you know, you said Scholes wasn't very much a leader-like character, but Gerrard very much was for Liverpool, and you can see that he's brought that into his time there at Rangers. I think Lampard's done a good job as well. Yeah, it's been tough for him as well, but I think he's done a good job in terms of bringing in really young talent, using his contacts really well to sort of get those players in on loan, and sort of bring Jody Morris into the setup as well. But as you mentioned, you know, it's funny when a manager comes into a new club, more often than not, if they're coming into a new club, it's because the old one's been sacked, you know, as opposed to left. So clearly the environment might not be perfect anyway, because they've just probably gotten rid of a new manager. So it's always going to take time for managers. But as we know in the game now, the game doesn't afford you time. But I think with the Scholes incident, or his short time there at Oldham, there was a feeling of micromanaging, wasn't there, from the owner? And he probably didn't expect that to be the case. And he's obviously felt that he didn't really need to, well, certainly not for money-wise. You know, I think he was asked a question, you know, are you wondering what you're doing? And I think he answered, yep, yeah. I've been thinking that all week. He doesn't need it. Clearly, he's got ambitions. He wants a new challenge, and I think he thinks management is the challenge. But the conditions weren't right. So, you know, if you think of it from his point of view, he probably felt that walking away was the right option for him.
But if you happen to be fortunate enough to be in a position to own a football club, Vishali, so you are the employer, are you entitled to ask your employee, i.e. Paul Scholes, what the team is, what the formation is, what training sessions you'll set today, how we're preparing for a game? Are you entitled to question and quiz your manager?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're entitled to question it and ask those questions, but I think there is a fine line. You don't want the manager to feel like you are taking control of anything or questioning him to the point where you're criticising, perhaps.
But challenging people generally makes them better, right?
I think so. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think you need to be quite careful that you don't cross the line. You know, you need to give the managers the tools. I think you've got to be involved in discussions with the manager. You've got to have a good relationship with the manager. And I think that was clear that there was not a good relationship there. But I think there is a fine line. If you cross that line, it then looks like you are trying to take control and not giving the manager his full control over his team and his decisions as well.
Is there a danger with ex-England players that they turn up at football clubs, Scholes, Lampard, Gerrard, no matter which player it is over time, that they arrive at football club as the player that was once idolised, a terrace hero, has got all the trophies, got all the medals? Is that the danger?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Ollie touched on this earlier. Well, if you look back in history, a lot of the greatest ever managers were really mediocre players. Without being disrespectful, Fergie was a
He would dispute that.
Mourinho, you know, Wenger, the list goes on.
Why is that? Did they have to work harder to compensate?
Because management is a totally different skill and art to being a player. So the greatest player in the world may not be any good at managing. Gary Neville was a great player, one of our best, and he's tried his hand at management, and that's turned out badly for him. So, yeah, I can see why owners go for people like Scholes and Lampard. You know, very intelligent guys. You would like to think they know the game inside out, but put them in the muck and nettles of a job like at Oldham, and it's you're just unprepared, aren't you, really? I would have thought Scholes wouldn't have been that prepared for that demand.
But there's an issue. I wrote this column yesterday in the paper, and a lot of people say, oh, they're arrogant. They go into these jobs and think that they can do it. Sort of medals on the table and all that, and that is not. I think that perception was right about sort of 20 years ago when people would literally they'd retire one day and then or they'd start as player manager. At age 32, no coach qualifications, etc., and just sort of breeze into it and then be surprised when it all goes wrong. I think now all of the guys we've spoken about to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, Sol Campbell's got his pro licence and he's starting at the very bottom of the league. Is that arrogant? I don't think it is. Frank Lampard, he's closing in on his pro licence as is Gerrard, and they've gone in with their eyes open. They've both coached at youth level. Gerrard for with the Liverpool under-18s, and there is that sense of I need people around me who can help me. I'm just a front man here. I don't think there's arrogance there. I don't think people now go in with that medals on the table.
Well, they have to
mentality.
prove themselves all over
again. They do have to
don't
prove themselves. And what I don't really like about the way we perceive them is that Frank Lampard wins an FA Cup tie at Southampton, and people are saying, "Oh, he's an ex-Chelsea manager," and then he'll go on a difficult run for a few weeks, which he has, and people say, "Oh, Lampard, he's another of these players," and you just need to take a step back and think, is he doing a good job? Do his team look well prepared, well coached? Has he gone in with a clear idea? And I think he has, and he's doing a good job, but one which, in that division, you could very easily finish outside the top six because it's.
I just wondered, did Lampard walk into that job thinking that he's got to learn? And if you take it back to someone like Mourinho in his first job, whether he would have walked in and said, "I know everything there is to know. I've worked at Barcelona. I've worked with the greatest managers, the greatest managerial minds, with Louis van Gaal, with Bobby Robson." Would Mourinho have walked into his first job and said, "There's nothing I can learn. I know it all"?
Probably, because that's just his personality.
I kind of teed you up for that, didn't I?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he would have actually come up with those exact words, but in his mind, that's his personality. He does genuinely believe that he's one of the best managers, and he's obviously proven that he's one of the best managers with his record. But I think it's an interesting point that you make. I don't think these former players nowadays are actually arrogant. I think there's a will to prove themselves as good managers, and I think that's why they've gone down the route of getting their coaching badges and maybe not taking jobs at the top end. They've gone down into the Football League and taking jobs there. I think they really want to prove that, yes, they were great players, but actually they can be really good managers as well. And they don't want to seem like they're getting an easy ride in management just because they were good players. I think that's why you've seen these players go to the lengths that they have done, like, taking on jobs in the Championship, League One, going to Scotland and doing the coaching badge, doing it the right way,
One man who has, one man who hasn't put a foot wrong since he's went into coaching and was one of the greatest, Zidane. Superb
Dresses
player.
well too.
Dresses well. He gets his inspiration clearly from you. 3 successive Champions League victories in the final. He's back. The impact last night against Celta Vigo was instant with a victory. And okay, it's the first game, but he has managed the transition perfectly.
Yeah, although it would probably be fair to say you're talking about a unique scenario there with Zidane, in that he's at the biggest club in the world with what has proved to be the most, iconic squad in recent memory. So it's good that he's gone back, and he's gone back at a time when actually that team we'll actually probably find out how good a manager he is, because the feeling in Spain from the guys who work over there.
Come on, be fair to go. In the past, the Galactico era, whether that's Capello in charge, they couldn't win the Champions League. They're the great players: Roberto Carlos, David Beckham, Zidane in the centre midfield. They couldn't crack it.
Well, they didn't have Ronaldo.
But he managed the dressing. That's the art, isn't it? That's the art of management. These are the tools you've got. You've got the best players in the world. Make sure they win the Champions League. Well, he did once, twice, 3 times.
He did, but Ronaldo was a key figure to that, because he has been arguably one of the greatest players ever. So, but he's now gone back to a team that is breaking up. It's ageing. There's issues with Bale. He's going to have to make some big signings. Who's he going to sign? I know he's been linked with De Gea. So, you know, they can't win a trophy between now and the end of the season, so they're already planning for next season. I reckon if you managed Real Madrid last year, you'd have won a Champions League with them. So would I.
On Championship Manager, maybe, on a computer.
Give the ball to Ronaldo.
You're a hard man to. You are a hard man to please.
There is a fair point to be made in that if you look at their league performance over those 3 seasons, it wasn't great at all.
Well, he won 1 La Liga, didn't he?
Well, Ronaldo only won. Ronaldo, your man, the greatest player of all time, the GOAT. He only won 2. He only won the league title in Spain twice.
He only deals in European Cups, though, Ronaldo, didn't he?
But some of their league performances, their league campaigns have been disappointing. The same again this season without him, and even the Champions League last season, it was very much brinksmanship. So it's that, you know, the game against Bayern, the game against Juventus, very much on a knife edge, those 2 ties. And was he, you know, is he a brilliant manager? We know he's won 3 European Cups, but I think we're now about to find out how good a manager he is. Is he a better manager than Guardiola because he's won 3 Champions League? Well, I wouldn't say so. But now, having probably done very little in terms of building in his first spell, now he's got to build. He's got to rebuild a team that had just been allowed to.
It's a repair job, isn't it, basically?
Yeah.
So Charlie, just quickly come to my rescue on Zinedine Zidane.
Well, I think his biggest strength was actually, as you mentioned, was managing the egos in that dressing room, because you can always say you've got great players, but if you can't get the best out of those players and keep them happy, someone especially like Cristiano Ronaldo, you're not going to do really well with that great group of players. So I think that was his biggest strength. And you look at someone like Emery at PSG, where he just couldn't manage to, you know, implement his tactics but keep everyone happy in the dressing room, and that kind of helped him exit the club. But Zidane has done that really well. Clearly, there are big issues now. You know, who did they sign up front to bolster their attacking options? Courtois, there's an issue there with the goalkeeper. Bale, obviously. So we will be finding out just how good of a manager he is. But he is up there, you have to say, based on 3 Champions League titles.
I reckon if Jeremy Cross walked into the Real Madrid dressing room at the Bernabeu, he'd say, lads, throw your medals in the bin. We're going to win it better this year.
He's the most stylish manager.
He is the most stylish. We've got the most stylish guest on after Vishali this morning. We're going to talk about Sam Wallace's column next in part 4 of today's programme. It's the World Cup with 48 teams in Qatar. More on that coming next. Welcome back. You're watching Sunday Supplement. Of course, as ever, following us is Goals on Sunday with Ben and Cammy. Let's find out what the boys are up to. Ben.
Morning, Neil.
Morning, everybody.
So just a short hour for us today?
Yeah, just a short hour, but we've got so much to talk about, Ben. There was so much going on yesterday that we could have filled another hour after that.
Yeah, some last-minute winners and equalisers. And also, Darren Bent is going to be joining us well.
Yeah, first time on the programme.
Is it really?
In the whole time, yeah.
Goodness
He's
me.
one I've been chasing for a while.
Well, we finally got our hands on him. He's going to be joining us. So it'll be interesting to get his thoughts on what he saw yesterday, and also talking about some of the important moments in his career, not least the beach ball goal, Cam.
What a brilliant goal that was.
Right, we'll be live at about 11 o'clock, so we'll see you then.
I don't think Liverpool fans were very happy about that day. Was it Stadium of Light, wasn't it, I think, back in the day? Darren Bent, of course, on Goals on Sunday, following us. OK, it's an international theme now in part 4 of the programme. Let's start with the World Cup 2022 Qatar. And news, a word reaching us, and Sam's written about it in his column this morning, of the potential and the increasing likelihood that the World Cup in Qatar will be expanded to include 48 teams, which will mean almost certainly that they will need to borrow a neighbouring country and their stadiums as well. What are your thoughts on an expanded tournament and also taking it out of Qatar and into another country, into a neighbouring country?
I'm not a fan, if I'm being honest. I think if Qatar was given the rights to this World Cup, they need to be hosting it. And I know the next World Cup is going to be a joint World Cup, but I think to then take it to neighbouring countries, I mean, you've got to think about logistical sort of aspects of it for journalists as well as fans. You know, the amount they're going to have to travel now, and also the amount of games we're going to be watching. I mean, clearly we all love the World Cup. We love all the games, but if you think about the amount of games that were on, I mean, I was at the World Cup last year for 5 weeks in Moscow. There wasn't a day that I wasn't at a game up until sort of the knockout rounds. When I was finishing a game, there was another game started. You had to sort of catching up. It was just mental. It was great. It was fun, and I wouldn't take it back for anything. But I think increasing it to 48 teams is going to be it's going to be tough logistically for fans, for journalists. But clearly, this is about money. This is about taking drumming up interest in other countries with other fan bases and making more money. And that's what FIFA are prioritising here, I think.
Do we have an issue with the quality? Because 48 teams saw at the World Cup, the standard in Russia in the group games particularly, that at times, and of course we do get spoiled with the elite level Champions League football comes straight off the back of Real Madrid's victory in the Champions League final against Liverpool and into a World Cup where you have to work your way through the group phase. But is there an issue with quality?
Yeah, I would say so. Qualifying for a World Cup is a privilege, but it's also hard. So a World Cup should be for the elite nations who have earned the right to be there. And this clearly would dilute that to a certain degree. So I don't agree with it. I agree with Vichy. And it's obviously the politics at FIFA and places like that. You can't even begin to try and get your head around it all, really. But he's clearly thinking ahead, Infantino, and it's all about self-preservation and getting re-elected, and he's trying to curry favour and votes with other nations.
Ollie? Can we expect amazing?
No, I think Sam's column sums it up perfectly. I think expect appalling is probably the better slogan in many ways. But FIFA have got a choice. Is the World Cup meant to be an elite competition, or is it meant to be this sort of, an expanded sort of festival of football? I think you can make a case for making it a 48 team or a 64 team World Cup, in that it makes it more of a bigger, wider event. But you can't make that case at all for Qatar 2022, which is a tournament taking place in a country the size of Kent, I think it is, with nothing like as big a population, and it's already taking place in November, in the football season. There are already concerns about trying to crunch all the games into that short period. It's already condensed. I think it's absolute madness to try and introduce that for 2022. I think you could make a case for doing it for 2026 or thereafter.
When it's on a continent.
I don't actually mind the idea of a tournament being spread out in the way that talk about with Euro 2020, as long as it's done in a way that actually considers fans, so that they're not going from Lisbon to Baku to Copenhagen for games in the same group. If it's sort of regionalised, I think that's quite sensible. I don't think it's sensible, by the way, to have a tournament in Qatar in the first place for many, many reasons, and we haven't mentioned human rights, but there are so many reasons why Qatar doesn't make sense.
Sam sums it up right at the end of his piece when he said it just feels all like this is the wrong time to be thinking about this, in the wrong place, and the tournament itself is taking place at the wrong time of year. And it's the wrong amount of numbers to be involved.
Undoubtedly, though, in the capitalist world, Sam makes the point in his final paragraph, his last line, which is if you can afford to pay for it, you can pretty much do whatever you want.
Well, I think that's what it's coming down to. This decision is clearly about money, and also Infantino, trying to get more favour from the other nations. But it comes down to money. I think it's not really about the football.
What is the expanded Club World Cup? What's that all about? Again, is that down to money?
Possibly, yeah, I think so. I think a lot of the decisions that we see from FIFA often centre on money, And yes, when they took the World Cup to South Africa, when they took it to Russia as well, it was also about bringing the game and drumming up interest in other nations and taking, this elite world football tournament to countries that hadn't had it before. So yes, I'm in favour of things like that. I don't think it should be in Qatar either, the World Cup. But it's great that it is going to a new place. But I think with the Club World Cup as well, it's about money.
Yeah. OK, we need to move on. We need to talk about the England squad. England play the Czech Republic on Friday night at Wembley. Montenegro away on Monday evening. Thoughts on the squad that Southgate picked? Declan Rice, of course, named in that squad just a few days after being named Ireland's young player. Young player of the year. Funny that.
Yeah, there weren't many surprises in the squad. We all thought, pretty much presumed Declan Rice would be in there. Callum Wilson kept his place, which I was pleased about because he'd been injured. Surprised Delph was in there, to be honest. He's not played much for City. He played yesterday and dropped a bit of a clanger there. John Stones has not played much. He's been injured. He's just getting back into the side at City, so I was sort of surprised a little bit that he was picked. But yeah, look, Southgate has surprised us with a lot of selections since he took over. Caught us all on the hop with certain ones, and this was one of the more sort of settled squads that he picked. But they will go into these two games fully expecting to win both of them.
Mm.
And what he's done really well, Southgate, he's kept up that. So obviously, after the summer in Russia, there was always the danger that things would dip, and it was about maintaining that feel-good factor, and he's done that really well, I think.
Mm. You were at Watford Palace yesterday. I think the bright spot in the Palace side, and just about the only bright spot, was the performance of Wan-Bissaka. Are you surprised that Palace's right-back wasn't named in that squad? And I know it's a competitive field, a highly competitive field for that spot, but Bissaka, every single statistic across European football at the moment, just the stats alone would say Bissaka should be in that squad.
Yeah, I was very surprised he wasn't in that squad. I understand what Gareth Southgate has tried to do. I mean, clearly, the competition for that spot is tough in the England squad, but Southgate was trying to explain it, and he was saying, you know, he wants to keep faith with the players who got them to the semi-finals at the World Cup. I understand that, and Trippier hasn't had necessarily a good season at Spurs, but he wants to show the faith in those players that, despite the fact that if you're not having a great time in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, he's still showing the faith in, you know, you're still part of my longer-term plans. But I think Wan-Bissaka should certainly have been given the chance to at least be part of the squad, train with the players. I mean, he nearly scored a goal, equaliser at the end of that game for Palace. But I think his time will come. You know, this is not the be-all and end-all for him. His time will come.
Yeah. In the under-21, he is in the under-21 squad though, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, in the past there's not been a sort of very clear, joined-up strategy between the age group teams, and I think these days, if a player who's on the fringes of the senior squad is in the under-21s, it's been done with proper thought. Is it more beneficial? I mean, is it more beneficial for him to go in the senior squad as maybe third choice right back? And obviously, you could say he could be first choice right back, but if he wasn't going to start the game, is it more beneficial for him to go with the senior squad or to gain more international experience by playing with the under-21s, which is, I think you can make a very good case for doing that, rather than upsetting the established. You know, it's not even been an established order for very long, and to axe Kieran Trippier from the squad, or Kyle Walker from the squad, or Alexander Arnold from the squad would probably seem really harsh and unnecessary to Southgate. And I think he's got a long-term plan, which I expect Wan-Bissaka to be in there before long, but there's no rush with it.
No, sure. OK, we'll get to see England in action on Friday night against the Czech Republic, and again on Monday in Montenegro. OK, next up, we're going to talk about Everton and Chelsea. Theo Walcott has turned 30. More on him next. What I thought was a hard and fast rule, which was never ever look at social media until about 6, 7 o'clock this evening, when everything's calmed down a little bit. Some of our guests look at it during the break.
Don't blame me.
I'm not blaming you.
It's vanity.
Vanity. Did you find anything interesting?
Just looking for love on Twitter and finding none.
No, finding none.
Just hate.
Let's say some nice things about Theo Walcott. Turned 30, now at Everton. How will we look back on the first 14 years of his professional career?
Probably a talent and a potential unfulfilled, I think. Clearly, he had a lot of talent. He had that amazing start when he joined Arsenal, was called up to the World Cup squad. That, I think, came way too early in his career. I think it gave him a kind of pressure, and it gave people expectations of what we could expect from him that perhaps he struggled to handle, I think, at times. Unfortunately for him as well, I think, you know, his time at Arsenal, you know, he joined at a really good time when there were legends still there. They'd been to the Champions League final. But then with Arsenal kind of stagnating on the pitch with all the issues around it, I felt like his career kind of stagnated at Arsenal. Of course, I think he made the right decision in leaving. And of course, he left for Everton because he wanted to work with Sam Allardyce. He thought that Allardyce could resurrect his career, but it hasn't really turned out that way at Everton. Only 3 goals and 2 assists so far this season, so it's been a hard struggle for him. You kind of do wonder what could have been with his talent and his potential. But yeah, it's been a tough time at Everton so far. But you hope he can.
Just a feeling of frustration, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I remember.
But when he looks back on his career, you won't look back and think that was a bad career. He's played at elite level. He's played at elite level. He's played for England. He's played for Arsenal. He's played for Everton. He may not have fulfilled expectation.
He went to a World Cup at 16. Was he 16?
Yeah.
Never went to another World Cup. Never will. So when you're put on that pedestal at such a young age, it's almost career-defining right there and then, because you think, God, this guy's in the England World Cup squad and he's 16. And immediately you think he's going to be a world-class player. But the problem, I remember seeing him at Leeds. He played for Southampton against Leeds, and he ripped Leeds to pieces that night. And you just thought, he was so quick, and pace is such a virtue for footballers. I mean, Michael Owen had a great career using pace. There was far more to his game than just pace, but it was it's just a gift, isn't it, being blessed with such pace. And there was no one quicker than Walcott when he was at his peak. But he never got a settled position at Arsenal, did he? He played down the middle, he played out wide, and he sort of maybe joined Arsenal at a time when Wenger's ability to progress young players was maybe starting to wane a little bit. You may disagree with that. But just a feeling of frustration, just a great talent, and, he's not won much. Just
2 FA Cups. Yeah.
He scored a lot of goals in his career.
Yeah.
Not a staggering number of goals, but a lot of goals. He's also had injuries, bad injuries at bad times, and I think that needs to be taken into account. But he always felt he was a centre forward, that he needed to play centre forward, and maybe
that's where he made his name at Southampton, wasn't it?
I
saw him against Luton.
Yeah.
Scored a couple down at St Mary's. You saw him against Leeds back in the day. Yeah.
But he spent most of his Arsenal career sort of wide right in a 4-2-3-1, which I don't think suited him at all, really. I mean, it made him sort of more of a head-down type winger, and I don't think he ever quite developed in the way that, well, we would have wanted to, but also the way he would have wanted to develop. There were flashes and periods where it looked like something clicked with him, and he started to look like a really natural finisher. But I'd say there've been spikes in his career where he's looked like fulfilling his potential, and maybe those spikes have been fewer and further between since the injuries and since maybe a sense of stagnation at Arsenal. So it's probably isn't quite the love and tribute that you were talking about. But
has it been a good career? Will he look back and think?
Yeah, I think so. He played for Arsenal. He's at Everton now. He did go to a World Cup. I think he's got over 100 goals, didn't he, for Arsenal in 378 appearances, something like that. So I think it's been a good career for him. Yeah.
Yeah, has been. Okay. Might see him in action this afternoon for Everton. They play Chelsea, of course, at Goodison Park. Okay. We've run out of time for today's programme. Thanks very much to Ollie, to Vishali, and to Zizou, a.k.a. Jeremy Cross, for joining us this morning. OK, lots of football coming your way. Ollie and we're off to Craven Cottage very shortly. We're going to see Fulham. They play Liverpool. That's first up on Sky Sports Premier League. Everton against Chelsea follows that this afternoon. Download the Sky Sports app. You can watch the in-game goals and the highlights on your mobile phone. Goals on Sundays next. Ben and Cammy. Look at the millennials. Get off your phones, boys. Keep telling you this. They've got Darren Bent from Goals on Sunday next. OK, don't forget you can download the podcast from all the usual places. Catch up with the show on demand. We're back next week at 9:30. See you then. Bye-bye.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.